Juicy. What does it mean? How do I get it? Why are all the cool game designers talking about it? Hello, I'm Ulysses. I am looking at games from a design perspective, trying to pick out what works and what could be better. This shiny top-down shooter game is called Go Mecha Ball. You play as a kitty with a mechanized suit in a Sonic the Hedgehog pinball-like world. Okay, I'll say it. This is probably the juiciest game I've ever played. There he goes again talking about juice. A game is juicy when the supplemental sound and visual effects in the game greatly enhance the experience. Let's dive into what I mean. To get a sense of the juicy visuals in Go Mecha Ball, you only need to watch the gameplay in slow motion. It's like every few frames there's something that's colorful or jumpy or distorted or shaky. In anticipation of attacking, the enemies signal it in multiple ways. Color changes, wind-up animation, squashing and stretching. When you attack back, there's bright flashes from your bullets, or smoke pouring out when you speed boost around curled up as a ball. Just watch what happens when you boost into an enemy or when you take damage. There's a bit of a hit stop, where the movement freezes for a few frames, the player enemy changes color, and then there's some crazy TV distortion effects. The UI work is also phenomenal. Shooting off bullets causes the bullet counter to inflate in size. Collecting money to spend at the shop brings up a colorful notification. Gaining or losing health bumps the health indicator. The cooldown for abilities at the bottom of the screen tweaks the fuck out. The cooldown for your speed boost, which is always shown just below the player, flashes when it's done. And the level start, level complete text overlays are cool as fucking hell. However, sometimes in the fast-paced rolling and shooting, all the special effects make the visual hierarchy a bit unclear. The health bar scales and jumps up each time you take damage, but it's not the only thing that scales or jumps while you're playing. And it wasn't uncommon that I was surprised how little health or ammo I had because its importance had faded into the background compared with the other moving UI elements. Similarly, on occasion, there are just too many enemies and effects obscuring the area around you, and you lose track of which one's you. I mentioned that this game also has Sonic the Hedgehog pinball feeling, and this becomes evident in the later levels where you depend on speed boosts on the ground, half-pipe ramps, and tubes to get around bigger maps. It starts to feel like you're inside some large machine. Something that's striking about being a ball in this large machine is how unhuman it feels to knock into bumpers and suddenly be going the opposite direction. Or moving towards a ramp and just rolling up the ramp. And it doesn't stop at the player. Enemies can also be knocked off the cliff by the spring-loaded mechanisms in the game. For the most part, the platforming feels really good. Going into and out of the ball form takes only a few frames and makes your character sound very big and powerful. Getting around and dodging enemy projectiles feels surprisingly fluid, despite the momentum you built up in ball form. Trying to land on enemies' heads is not too hard, because you can see your shadow below, and it's highly rewarded, as this way you don't need to spend your boost ability to knock into and damage the enemy, you can just come from the sky. That being said, the game is very fast-paced, and some of the awkwardness getting around can often break long-running combos you rack up from killing and parrying enemies. In one of the levels, you have to roll over switches to activate certain platforms for a short period of time. It's actually quite cool that the level is so changeable, but the switches are just a little too small, and if you miss them, you sometimes risk going right off the cliff, which breaks your combo. Okay, the switches should be bigger, but let's talk about your combos. There's a visual indicator on the left side of the screen that tells you how many enemies you've destroyed in your combo, maxing out at 8. Somehow, I played through the entire game without being aware of what the combo does. I guess it gives you extra money? I'm actually not really sure. Anyway, the awkwardness of the switches also overlaps with a bigger problem I see in the game, the out-of-bounds areas, or falling off the cliff. I truly feel the game is worse for having out-of-bounds damage. If you can fall off the edge, then you have to be careful about your platforming, and I think the game works better without you having to be so careful. The player shouldn't worry that a misplaced speed boost will not only fly past their target, but go off the cliff and potentially kill themselves. That's just not what the game feeling is about. For me, it takes me out of flow, worrying about it. There's also these pipes. I love going to the different heights in the level to attack enemies, but occasionally there's a pipe that's just a bit too long. And not only does it risk breaking your combo, but more importantly, the pacing in the game. They're really good for the twisting hallways leading up to the boss room, where the long pipes and quiet music build suspense. Perhaps in the non-boss levels, the pipes could be faster, or there could be some simple button pressing challenge in the pipes to engage the player that increases the speed or attack power coming out of the pipe. In some places, you notice that there are no pipes because it's really hard to get up to a higher platform. I mentioned before that the game controls fairly well on the ground and in the air, but this is a spot where it doesn't. And again, it breaks the pacing. Getting up on these high platforms is tough and tedious. This could probably be mitigated by adding pipes or ramps, or these enemies could be replaced by automatic turrets that you don't have to destroy to clear the level. Something I do want to celebrate though is how learning works in the game. The enemies in the levels leading up to each boss often exhibit traits that the boss has, so when you face the boss, you've already familiarized yourself with the mechanics in a less lethal environment. And the boss fights also often incorporate platforming, so all the time you spend platforming fighting normal enemies is also training to fight the boss. You'll notice too that the enemies telegraph their moves well with different effects and symbols, indicating if the attack is something you can parry versus something you should definitely avoid. And the boss will do the same thing. The last design point I want to touch on is the balancing in Go Mecha Ball. This game is somewhat on the easy side, but it doesn't feel too easy. I think a lot of that is due to quality of life touches in the design. When you're about to fight the boss, there's a shop that's run by a strange but nonetheless cute mechanical cat. This gives you an opportunity to heal up and prep for the big fight ahead. There are a variety of enemy types, like those that can only be attacked via boosting, armored enemies that shoot laser beams in a circle, giant cannons that fire at you, enemies that drop from above. They keep the game feeling fresh and from getting too repetitive and easy. Enemies generally stay in the area they're spawned in, so they don't mob you if you run away to take a break or look at the weapon drops from the ones you already took down. And while you're away, there's no timer ticking down to give you a false sense of urgency, besides the combo. The enemies spawn in waves, and the next wave doesn't come until you've eliminated all the enemies in the current wave, so you have time, if you want, to slow down and strategize. And strategize you can. There's a somewhat unbalanced, degenerate strategy if you acquire the ability to stun enemies from the random cards at the end of each level. The strategy goes like this: stun the enemy with the stun ability, shoot them with guns, and then speed boost into them. Stun, shoot, boost. After you finish pulling off your boost, usually by this time, the stun ability's cooldown has probably already finished and you can just rinse repeat. Alright, that's all I have. This game is juiced to the max. Short and sweet. Go check it out.